All right, so we're going to start on page 30 of the notes. And those of you who are watching on YouTube or on our website from the video, or you listen to it on audio, you can download the PDF file that has the lecture notes that we're following, and or if you want the PowerPoint, also available on our website, teacherofthebible.com, so you can follow along with our teaching. All right, so I'm going to begin with a review of what we said last time. And basically, it was the beginning of love. This is where they meet each other. They first start seeing each other, is in that first chapter. And the woman wants to be kissed again and again. That was right from the beginning. Verse 2, she wants to be drawn away with her man, and that's going to be the thing that the man focuses on here in chapter 2, to draw away. He picks up that that's what she likes, and he's going to focus on that. And she even wants to be alone with him when he takes his siesta out in the field when he's at work. So she's looking for any way to hang out with him. So they are discovering each other, and they have mutual love for one another. They want to get away together. They want to sit under the shade of the trees. So they want to just be alone, leave us alone. We want to get to know each other. We love each other. We are wanting to get closer together. So these two lovers admire each other's beauty. And of course, as you guys know, when you first, one of the things that first draws most people together is the physical attraction. That's just natural. Obviously, we see character qualities that we like in the person. That draws us. When I first met my wife, I was totally overwhelmed by her humility. I never met somebody that was humble like that. So I was really drawn to that. But, of course, I was drawn to her physical beauty, too. So that is something that is attraction. But obviously, as Christian believers, that can't be the only attraction that draws us. But in this case, it is. They are drawn to each other physically. All right, so tonight we're going to go verse by verse through chapter 2. The first chapter and the second chapter are the longest chapters in the Song of Solomon. Next week's chapter will be quite short, but these are the two longest, and we won't take as much time as last time because we won't have to go explain everything. But here we're going to see a woman who is in love, and she is going to do most of the talking. And she's even going to tell you what she heard the man say. So that's going to be an interesting perspective because it'll give us men an idea of what a woman is focused in on. Again, remember, this is a supernatural revelation from God. This is not just a woman giving her opinion. This is not a woman that just, I'm going to tell you what I think. This is a supernatural revelation from the Holy Spirit of which really in the heart of a woman. This is what a woman really wants. And so a lot of times because of abuse and problems that we have in relationships, women don't even know what they really want. But here we have a revelation telling us exactly what a woman desires. So let's read it here from the Song of Songs, chapter 2. I'm going to read verse 1. I'm going to read all 17 verses through. It starts out, and tonight we're going to look at the three most famous verses in the Song of Songs is in chapter 2. They're in chapter 2. So the other verses you may not know as well, but these three most everybody knows. I am the rose of Sharon and the lily of the valleys. Like a lily among thorns, so is my love among the daughters. And then the woman speaks again, like an apple tree among the trees of the woods or the forest, so is my beloved among the sons. I sat down in his shade with great delight, and his fruit was sweet to my taste. Now the Shulamite woman is talking again. He brought me to the banqueting house, and his banner over me was love. That's another famous verse. Sustain me with cakes of raisins and refresh me with apples, for I am lovesick. Some translations say faint with love, or I'm hungry for love. Now he shows how to kiss her. His left hand is under my head, and his right hand embraces me. I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles or by the does of the field, Do not stir up or awaken love until it pleases. That's another well-known verse. It shows up 3 times in the Song of Songs. The voice of my beloved, behold, he comes, leaping upon the mountains and skipping upon the hills. My beloved is like a gazelle or a young stag. Behold, he stands behind our wall. He is looking through the windows. He's gazing through the lattice. Now she's going to hear what he said. Okay, so this is the woman speaking, but she's speaking what she heard the man say. My beloved spoke and said to me, rise up, my love, my fair one, or my beautiful one, and come away. For lo, the winter is past, the rain is over and gone. The flowers appear on the earth. The time of singing has come, and the voice of the turtle dove is heard in our land. The fig tree puts forth or ripens her green figs, and the vines with the tender grapes give a sweet smell or fragrance. And then he repeats again. She heard him say this again. Rise up, my love, my fair one, or my beautiful one, and come away. Now the man speaks, O my dove, in the clefts of the rock, in the secret places of the cliff, let me see your face and let me hear your voice, for your voice is sweet and your face is lovely. And here's probably the 3rd most famous verse in the Song of Songs is this verse, verse 15. Catch us the foxes, the little foxes that spoil the vines, for our vines have tender grapes. And then this is the ultimate desire of a woman, and it's mentioned 3 different times in the Song of Songs. It's definitely expressed in what she just said. The man said, my beloved is mine, my lover is mine, and I am his. He feeds his flock among the lilies. And then it closes out, until the day breaks and the shadows flee away. Turn, my beloved, and be like a gazelle or a young stag upon the mountains of Bether. All right. Well, a lot of things are said in these verses. Again, very famous verses, and all of them found here in the 2nd chapter. I want to start out again by saying that marital relationships, the feelings, the love, the desires, the sex, the attraction, all of that can only be powerful and passionate if it's pure. That's the only way it works. If it's not that way, it doesn't work. It falls apart. It's unholy. It's defiling. It's shameful. And it won't work. So this book shows us how to have true, passionate love for a husband, for a wife. All right, so, and I apologize again for the notes. I'll try to clear it up next time and make sure that the notes are a little bit easier to read. But there was a plain, get this right here. There was a plain along the Mediterranean coast called the Plain of Sharon. Sharon was the plain, and this place was known for its beautiful flowers. Now, the word that's used here for rose is not exactly like a rose like we have it, but it's the closest thing that we have in English, because the plain of Sharon had a bunch of flowers, beautiful flowers, daffodils, lilies, and all that. So they use this word rose, and it's the closest to what they had there. But there were, the whole plain was full of flowers, so it was like a big flower area, and it was a whole plain of flowers. Now, the problem that we have with a lot of people and how they interpreted this verse is everybody, almost everybody, I say everybody, I'm probably making that too generic, but most people, when they look at this verse, they say that's Jesus. Okay. And the problem is, it was the woman who was saying this. The problem is that this was the Shulamite woman was saying this about herself. She's not talking about Jesus. Although you can say Jesus is the rose of Sharon and he's the lily of the valleys, and there's a song about that, and I don't have a problem with some people saying that, but this is not Jesus speaking here to us. This is the woman saying how she feels. And so this, of course, is the most famous verse in the Song of Songs. And we have to always keep in mind that it is the woman is speaking about herself. And I like this translation here because it accurately defines the definite articles in front of the word rose and lily. It's not an indefinite article. She's not a rose and she's not a lily, because then she would be like any other flower out there. She says, no, she says, I am the rose of Sharon. I am the lily of the valley. And so what she's saying is that out of all the roses, out of all the lilies, I am the main lily. I am the main rose. And something that I've pointed out before, but I think it's important to stress here. Remember when back in chapter 1, she didn't even want people looking at her because she had gotten too tanned, and she was just, she says, don't even look at me, I'm too dark, I've been tanned. And so she had a very bad self-image to start with, but as we read the rest of chapter 1, we see the man speaking of her as a beautiful woman. She's a fair woman. She's my love. She has beautiful eyes. He begins to build her up. He begins to tell her that she's a filly among Pharaoh's chariots and all these kinds of things. She tells her where he can be found. And so by the time he's done building her up, she's saying this of herself: I am the rose of Sharon, and I am the lily of the valley. Out of all of them, I am the number one. So this definitely, like Achan says, this woman was utterly unique. She was rare and special to Solomon. She was unique, and she was uniquely Solomon's. And so I've used this to say many times to my wife, if you think about it, right now on planet Earth, as I checked the population the other day, according to the internet, according to Google, says there's about 7.7 billion people now on planet Earth. And if we just take maybe half and just use the figure 3.5 billion women, just half the people or there's more women than men on planet Earth, but there's, let's just say 3.5 billion women on planet Earth. If you think of how unique your wife is, it's really amazing, isn't it? That out of all the women that are on planet Earth, God only gave you one, And as you know, the more unique a person is, the more valuable they are, the more valued things are. So my wife, I've told her this before, you out of 303,499,999,999, the last one that God had for me picked was you. And so you are very, very unique. There is none like you, and that makes you kind of like the Mona Lisa, Some paintings are dime a dozen, but you get a Mona Lisa, one of a kind, it has infinite value. And that's what God is trying to show us, I think, through this verse, is how valuable your wife is to you. And the more rare it is, the more expensive it is. I think I asked a friend of mine years ago who is a coin collector, I go, what is the most expensive coin, the rarest coin? And he said it was some kind of a buffalo head nickel, that there's only a couple of them on Earth, and that it's like worth millions and millions of dollars. And I saw a picture of it online, and I thought, man, people are willing to pay millions of dollars for a nickel. And I thought, that is so crazy, for a nickel, they're willing to pay millions of dollars. But the value is not in how much monetary that nickel is worth. The value is in how rare it is, And that's the same thing with your wife, She's so rare that the value goes way up through the roof, because of how rare and unique she is. So she's the one that's saying this about herself. She is, I am the rose of Sharon. I am the lily of the valley. There may be a billion lilies out here, but I'm the lily. And there may be a billion roses out here, but I'm the rose of Sharon. And I love that. She has a very good view of herself. Now, in verse 2, let me continue on here, with the notes. His love for her awakens in her a new self-respect. The woman of chapter 1, verses 5 and 6 was doubtful about her attractiveness she may have had. The woman here, on the other hand, as the object of his love, now glows with the radiance that all can see. So her whole speech about herself changed when her husband started praising her. And that is important for us men, to praise our wife. And Aiken says this, and I do agree with it. What matters the most is what a woman thinks about herself. If you tell her she's beautiful and all that, it doesn't register a lot of times until she believes it. If she believes it, then you can see that it registers. But it's key what a woman thinks about herself. And you remember that Jesus spoke about the beauty and the glory of the lilies, and that they were even more glorious than Solomon, arrayed in all of his splendor. So the lilies, if you get them under a microscope, they're so beautiful. There's so much detail in them that it's amazing what God has created. In verse 2, the man speaks now, and he agrees that if you compare her to the other women, he says to her, you're like a lily among thorns. And he says, so is my love, he's speaking of the woman, among the daughters. So among all the women, every other woman is like a thorn. He says, you are an absolute beautiful flower to me. And he says, so is my love among the daughters. Now you're going to notice the word among, right? In verse 2, among thorns. Verse 2, among the daughters. And then in the next verse, the woman is going to start talking about the man, and he's going to compare her also among the trees of the woods and among the sons. So they're going to compare each other, and they're going to see how utterly unique they are to one another. In the CEV, it says, my darling, when compared with other young women, you are a lily among thorns. Now, the Bible Society translators say, as a lily exceeds thorns in beauty, so my love, this woman, exceeds all the other women. So, Carr says, she is a lily indeed, but her beauty far surpasses the thorny weeds that are all around her. So, when you look at your wife, she is a lily, and everybody else is a thorn. And you don't want to get around thorns, right? Because you're going to get poked. In fact, the word here for thorn is the Hebrew word for to pierce, like to be pierced through by a thorn. So she says, you're a lily, everything else is just piercing my hand, it's cutting my hand. Hugh Weiler, who is a female commentator, she says, the man affirms and heightens her claim of verse 1. She is indeed a lily. What is more, she is a lily among thorns, beauty amidst plainness, softness among prickly things, and uniquely fragrant. So, here, as you're going to see in verse 2, he's speaking about her being among daughters. That's the Hebrew word is daughters, not girls or not women, it's daughters. Because in the next verse, she's going to talk about him and say, among all the sons, you're this way. You're like an apple tree. And so they're comparing one another with everybody else is what they're doing. And so among the sons and daughters, they're saying, I have what's best. So that's a good thing. All right, let's go to the top of page 32. And again, notice the word among 4 times these 2 verses. The woman also now magnifies the uniqueness of the man. Just as she is a lily among thorns, he's an apple tree among the trees of the woods. So he stands out. And as many commentators point out, apple trees do not grow in the forests, on their own. Just all of a sudden you come upon an apple tree. But what she's trying to show is it's as if you were walking among all these trees, all these trees, all these trees, and you see nothing but trees and trees after tree after tree after tree. And all of a sudden you see an apple tree. And that was very rare. You never saw apple trees out among the trees of the woods. Bottom line is she's saying you're so rare, you're so unique. Same as what she was saying about a lily among thorns, she's now using him as an apple tree. So you never find an apple tree in a forest. And I like what Wiersbe says. Basically, what she was saying about him, you're one in a million. You are just so unique for me that you're one in a million. Another thing that she says about him, and also she says, this is my beloved among the sons. So as she was among the daughters, he is among the sons. Also another thing is that I think is important for a woman to observe. She says, I sat down in his shade with great delight, and his fruit was sweet to my taste. So Achan says, tell others how they protect you. Tell others how they please you. I think that is very important. And she calls him over and over, my love, my beloved, my lover, all the way through. And she uses it a lot here in the second chapter, showing that he belongs to me. He's mine. He's my beloved. NIV says, my lover. But one of the things that I think is important is that shade or shadow has been used in the Bible. It's been a metaphor that's used a lot for protection, to have security, because a woman needs security. That's a very important thing to a woman. Proven says, more important than identifying the type of tree, however, is to understand the imagery which speaks of both protection and pleasure. And that's true. You go read commentaries, and I was reading some in preparation for this. I was reading some new commentaries. And people will write page after page, commentators will write page after page to try to identify what kind of an apple tree this is, or is it an apricot tree, or is it another type of tree? And Proven just says, look, it's not don't try to figure out exactly what kind of tree it is, because they don't have Washington apples over there in Israel, So it's a tree that produces fruit, okay? That's not the point of the message. The point of the message is it's a unique tree among all the other trees. But here's an important thing, that she could sit down under his shade and feel great delight. And Nelson is right. The woman felt completely safe in Solomon's presence. She was entirely at ease with Solomon. She experienced no threatening or unsettling moments in his presence. And I want to say that this is a very key discernment here for women when you court a man, is do you feel protected around this man? And do you feel safe? Do you feel secure around him? And if you don't, you have to wonder if that's really of the Lord for you. Because God has put it in the heart of a woman to feel safe, secure, and protected by her husband. So, a good word of discernment. Gledhill says this, the girl basks in the security of her lover. Here there is a strong indication of the role of the male as a protector of the female. He provides the security in which she can shelter and blossom. Now, Gledhill, I like one of the things that he does in his commentary is that he gives a free translation of the Song of Songs. He goes, look, I'm just going to tell you basically what this verse is saying. I'm going to use my own words. I'm not going to give you exact Hebrew word for word. I'm just going to tell you this is what it's saying. And I loved what he wrote down here for this free translation. He says, sheltered in his shade, I rest, relaxed, secure. And that's the way a woman should be with her man. She should be resting under his shade, totally secure, totally relaxed, enjoying his presence. She should feel that way. A woman should feel that way around her man. Now, here in verse 2 is probably the second most famous verse in all the Bible. And of course, everybody relates this to God and his banner over us being love. Well, again, this is not God speaking to us. This is the woman, and she's speaking to the daughters of Jerusalem. So this is girl talk. This is what I call girl talk. These are girls sitting down talking about stuff. And this Hebrew word here for banqueting house, you may have banqueting table, banqueting hall. Literally in Hebrew, it means a house of wine. And it was a place where people went to drink wine, and this main purpose was to fellowship. And by the way, this word for banqueting house is found in the book of Esther. If you remember, for Haman and for the king, she made these banquets and they served wine at these banquets. And so it was a place where people would sit down to have fellowship. Okay, again, we're using poetry. We're using poetic language. And what does it say? He brought her to this place of fellowship. And the banner that she put over her was a banner of love. And the word banner here, do you remember when, well, I'll give you an example. Have you seen the opening games of the Olympics where all the countries march in into the Olympic Games? And there's always somebody at the front with a flag, right? One of the main athletes is carrying the flag of that country. Well, if you go back into the book of Numbers, when they divided up all the tribes, they each had a banner. And the King James calls it a standard. Basically, it was a flag. And that flag had a certain insignia on it that identified that whole tribe based on that thing. Just like you can identify the Russians or the Japanese or the Chinese. You need to look at the people, you could tell, but mostly you look at the flag, and their flag is waving there. And so the banner that's flying over this woman is a banner of love. Whoever this guy is, he has a banner over her of love. And that's what everybody then can look over there and see. This is what this is all about. She really loves me. And that's what some of the translations say here, like the Living Bible paraphrase says, everyone can see how much he loves me. The CEV says, you led me to your banquet room and you showered me with love. So the love the king had for her was evident to everyone. He had even a flag over her saying that it was of love. Again, poetic language to show that they have fellowship together and they love one another. In fact, the love is so strong, in the next verse, she's going to be sick, love sick. She's going to be fainting with love. So, the United Bible Society's translator says, he took me to where we could drink deeply of our love. And he led me, or another way to say this, the translator says, he led me to where the wine of love flows freely. So I just want to ask you a question. How many women do you know today that are fainting with love for their husband? They're just almost ready to pass out because their husband is so in love with, they're so in love with their husband that they're swooning, oh my gosh, they need to be strengthened. Their legs are giving way because there's so much love going on between the husband and wife. That's so rare, that's so rare. You don't hear about any of that. Well, maybe the Song of Songs is what we need. We need to restore a genuine passion for our husband, for our wife, that's pure, that's powerful, that's passionate, that's loving, and that is strong. So, again, every time I walk up to my wife, I take a break from my study, and I walk up to her and I said, you know what, Irma, you are a lily among thorns. And she goes, please get over it right now. I'm using all this flowery language with her, and it's not really working out, but I'm trying. So, but it's amazing the passion that's going on between her and this man. So she says, Nelson says, she has so much passion that she felt nauseous, and she was sick with love. I don't necessarily like that, but the point was she was weakened by it. She was so in love that she was actually weak. And I think the NIV uses the word weak with, or faint with love. In chapter 5, verse 8, later on, she tells the daughters of Jerusalem, again, this is girl talk. She goes, I charge you, if you find my lover, what will you tell him? So she's talking to the girls. She goes, if you find him, what are you going to tell him? She says, tell him that I am faint with love. I'm lovesick. I need him. Some translations say weak with love. Others say hungry for love. Even though she's overwhelmed emotionally and physically by love for him, she wants to love some more. So she's saying, she's using two Hebrew imperative verbs here, sustain me with cakes of raisins and refresh me with apples. She wanted to be strengthened through these things so she could love even more. She didn't want to be weak in love. She wanted to remain strong in it. So she's willing to be strengthened just so she can do more of loving him. So that's a lot of passion. Aiken says both raisins and apples were viewed as highly erotic and sensual. And it was. In poetic language, in biblical language, these were revealed as something very sensuous. And I just take it to mean that she was fainting with love and she needed to be strengthened by something, and she was wanting to be strengthened by that. So here in verse 6, remember I told you last time, this is the way she wants to be held when she is kissed. The left hand is under her head. The right arm embraces me. She's saying that's the way he was holding her. So even the Bible teaches us how we should hold our husband or our wife when we embrace them and when we kiss them. And that's a very powerful way. So I'd recommend you try it if you haven't done it. And it works, I'm telling you right now. It also appears in the Song of Songs, chapter 8, verse 3. His left hand is under my head and his right hand embraces me. Night is right. The whole point of it, his translation is, his right hand held me tight. You're using your right hand to get your wife to be pressed up against you. You're using your left hand to get her face to be closer to you. So she's being held very close, and she acknowledges this. She likes this. This is the way she wants to be held. Isn't it interesting that compared negatively with Proverbs, when people go and do the wrong thing, it talks about why should you be embrace the bosom of another man's wife? You don't want to be embracing somebody else's wife. You want to embrace only your own wife. All right, let's go to the top of page 34. Now, I want to give you an example again because I know maybe you guys already believe that the allegorical interpretation is false, but there's a lot of people that they live or die by it. They're saying, they would even tell me I'm false, saying that this is all about a love relationship between a man and a woman. But I just want to show you how they interpret the hands here. I'm going to give you an example. In fact, as I was reading through all the ancient commentaries on how the early church fathers interpreted some of these verses, by the end of the time I was done reading it, I was so confused because like when we get down to verse 10, I think it is, where is it? 12, when they talk about the turtle dove. Well, one commentator said the turtle dove is Jesus. Another commentator said, no, it's not Jesus. The dove is a symbol of the Holy Spirit, so they said it was the Holy Spirit. And then another person says, no, it's not Jesus or the Holy Spirit. It's Christians who are filled with the Holy Spirit. And so this is just the way the allegorical interpreters arrive. They can make anything say anything. And notice here what these commentators say. One believes that the two hands are the two covenants of the old law and the gospel. So that's what one guy said. Another guy said the left hand means this present life and the right hand means eternal life. Okay, that's what another guy said. The next guy, Theodoret, he always is off the wall. He and Origen, Jerome, Augustine, all of them were so off the wall. Let us understand the references spiritually, which they always do. They spiritualize everything. Believing the so-called embrace to be a communion between the divine word and the pious soul. That's what he said. He also believed that God's grace comes from his right hand and his punishment comes from his left hand. So maybe God hits you upside your head with his left hand because he says his left hand is under my head. Well, again, you can see just with these three interpreters right here, you have four different interpretations with three guys. And again, that's why the allegorical interpretation is not another interpretation. It's another false interpretation. Clearly, totally false. And that's why these people interpret this and it's just all wrong. Okay, verse 7. This statement is repeated in chapter 3, verse 5, chapter 8, verse 4, always by the woman. And even chapter 5, verse 8 has an element of it. And Aiken says its repetition underlines its importance. And again, this is girl talk. This is a woman talking with the daughters of Jerusalem. It says it clearly right there in verse 7. We saw it also back in chapter 1, verse 5. She was talking to the daughters of Jerusalem. So this was the Shulamite getting with these girls, and they're having this girl talk. And one of the things that she puts them under oath, she says, do not stir up or awaken love until it pleases. The CEV says never to awaken love before it's ready. Another says not to awaken or excite my feelings of love until it is ready. The Shulamite warned the sorority of females to pursue passion at the proper time, according to Aiken. So, as you guys know, some people that are too young or they don't know how to handle passion and love or interests or feelings between a man and a woman, it gets out of control for them, and before you know it, they got all kinds of trouble and problems. And so here it says, don't stir this up. Hebrew imperatives, don't awaken it until you're ready, until it pleases. Aiken says, do not rush love. Give it time. Sex is a powerful gift. It is intoxicating. It has unbelievable potential for good or evil, to build up or tear down, to delight or destroy. And man, that is a big, big statement right there. I remember, I think I've shared before, I remember in high school, the best player on our high school football team was a running back, and man, he scored so many touchdowns. Even as a sophomore, he made all league. I mean, he just scored a lot of touchdowns. He was really fast. He was extremely gifted. I was a senior. He was a sophomore, and he was by far the best player on the team. And again, he was just all world. You know, he got recruited by large universities. Probably one of the best athletes that ever came out of our high school. Well, his junior year, he fell in love with a girl. And can I tell you, he was the sorriest athlete. I'm not exaggerating. The coach was so angry at him because all he could think about was his girlfriend. He fumbled the ball. He wouldn't score touchdowns. He just lamed it at practice. I mean, it was just terrible. And it was, I'm serious, he just was a guy that wimped out on love. And he was just so in love with his girlfriend. And he got recruited eventually by some school, but he quit out at the school where he was at, you know. And so there's something to be said about that. But anyway. Let me see where I'm at. Okay, so the same Hebrew word is used here twice for stir up and awake. They use just a slightly different tense in it, but it's the same word. He uses it twice, to stir up, to awake. It basically means to open the eyes, to wake somebody up. They're asleep and you wake them up. Gledhill says, in speaking to the daughters of Jerusalem, she is speaking to herself. She is basically telling herself to cool it, to wait for the appropriate time. Don't get too far along the road here with this love, because you don't want to wake it up, because once you wake it up, especially sexual things, you're going to open up a big can of worms if you don't do it within a marriage relationship. And you guys know the sensitivity of gazelles, right, and does. If you think, I thought, why would they put by the gazelles and by the does of the field? She's making this charge not to stir this up. You guys know that one little move, if you're hiding behind a bush and you make one crackling sound, you've noticed those deer, they take off just like that. One little move and they're gone. If you plan on shooting them, you're going to lose out, because those things are very sensitive to any kind of noise. And that's such a perfect picture language of what happens once you get a person stirred up with love and sexual things. They're going to go way past where they should go, and it's going to be a problem. Here in verse 8, the Shulamite is going to talk about her beloved. And she wants you to look at this. She says, behold. She said in verse 8, verse 9, behold, take a look at this. This is awesome. So we find behold in both verses. And throughout, we see this tone of breathless urgency. Hey, take a look at this. So she hears his voice. She sees him coming. And he's just like a gazelle speeding towards her. And she's just so excited. He's coming to me. And he's leaping upon the mountains. He's skipping upon the hills. And you guys know, right? You've seen those gazelles. And I was looking at pictures of how far gazelles can jump and how light on their feet they are, right? And this is such a beautiful language here of leaping upon the mountains, skipping upon the hills, like jumping from one mountain to another. But the whole point that she's trying to make here in verse 8, she just hears his voice and she sees that he's coming. He's coming for her. And she's coming swiftly to get over to where she is. And this excites her to no end, that he's coming over to get her. In the CEV, it says, I heard the voice of the one I love as he comes leaping over the mountains and the hills. Here, there is no doubt. It conveys the young woman's anticipation and excitement over her lover's arrival. And Longman says this communicates the mountains and the hills that the lover overcomes whatever obstacles in his desire to reach his beloved, this woman. Wiersbe says she heard his voice and she saw him coming toward her as a beautiful gazelle or a noble stag, bounding across every barrier that stood between him and his beloved. And she's thinking this in her mind. She sees this in her that's the way the man is coming at her, coming towards her, swiftly, quickly, jumping over every barrier just to get to her. And I think, again, this is going to be the very big impact when we start getting into verses like 10, 13, 16, when she starts really expressing what she really desires for a man. Here in verse 9, the NIV says, my lover is like a gazelle or a young stag. Look, there he stands behind our wall, gazing through the windows, peering through the lattice. So again, she pictures him like looking. He came here very swiftly like a gazelle, came there very quickly, and now he's standing there right by the wall of the house, and he's looking through. He's trying to look in the window. He's peering through the lattice, trying to see if he sees her. Again, she's expressing how excited she is that he is looking for her. He wants her. As his eyes spoke, and they spoke loudly, they also made clear his desire for the Shulamite. He was looking for her. He was gazing through the lattice to try to see her. Again, revealing how much he desires to be with her. Her lover has reached her home, but apparently dares not enter. He waits outside in the hope of catching a glimpse of her. Again, this is all language showing how she's thinking about him, that he's coming towards her, and he's trying to do everything he can to even just get a one glimpse of her. All right, top of page 36. And this is a place where and again, some of you guys may be, what would be a good Romeos? Some of you guys may be really good Romeos. You know what your wife desires. You know how to romance your wife. You know how to minister to her desires. But I always say verses 10 through 13 and then verse 16, we need to pay attention. The men need to pay attention, because this is what the woman heard him saying. I mean, of everything else, she zeroed in on these things that he said. And the main desire in the Song of Solomon that a woman has. She wants to be all alone with her husband for herself. Him thinking about her, alone with her. They've gone away together. That is her heart's desire. She wants him for herself. She doesn't want him thinking about ESPN and sports and work and hobbies and church and ministry, all those other things. She wants him for herself. That is the desire of the Shulamite. That is the desire of a woman. She wants that. So the woman hears and remembers what the man says to her, what my beloved spoke, what he said to me. So you have to remember what is being said in verses 10 down through 13. Some even go into verse 14. But what you're reading there is what she heard him say. So the man is speaking, but it's the woman who noted what he was saying. So the woman is telling us what the man said. So we need to listen up what the things are that she highlights. And you'll notice that in verse 10, she heard him say this, "Rise up, my love, my fair one, my beautiful one, and come away with me." And now, if you notice at the end of verse 13, same thing again. "Rise up, my love, my fair one, and come away." That's what she heard, man. She just filtered everything else out, and she was focused in on those things. I'm his love. I'm his beautiful one. He's saying to me, get up, let's go away and be together. Man, I tell you right now, that's why I put those little music notes on there. Man, you just pulled out the love violin and you are playing to a woman's strings. She needs to know, verse 16, that he is mine, I am his. And that's the ultimate desire for a woman. And so you can minister to a woman if you just tell her that, honey, let's get away, let's go together, let's go to the coast, let's be by ourselves. You and me, we're going to go together. And man, that is the beautiful thing. So verses 10 through 13 are the heart and soul of a woman's desire. She wants to be all alone with her man, have his full attention, and know that he belongs to her. So this is music to her ears. I want to be alone with my man. Today, there's every conceivable distraction for men, every conceivable thing that's coming at him, from his cell phone to sports to hobbies to even ministry can get in the way, and the woman feels like she is there's another lover in the house. The ERV says, "My lover speaks to me. Get up, my darling, my beautiful one. Let's go away." The CEV, let's go away together. And that's what she wants. She wants to be all alone with her man. That's her desire. That's what she hears him say. Now, verses 11, 12, and 13 are some of the easiest verses to interpret in the Song of Solomon. Because what she heard the man say was that it's springtime. That's why he's saying, come away with me. The winter's past, the rain's gone. Look, the flowers are blooming, everything's singing. You can hear the doves, you can hear the fig trees are blooming, the vines are going out. So let's get away together. It's springtime. Spring is in the air. Love is in the air. Birds are chirping. The flowers are blooming everywhere. So he's noticed the words he's noticed about that he's saying is, I want to be alone in a very romantic setting with you. So verses 11 through 13 describe springtime. Now, the Bible Society translators say what is in focus here is that the wet, rainy time is over. The sun has begun to shine, so the two lovers can go outside and enjoy the countryside. It is also the time when everything is green and the flowers are blooming. You know, the time to take your wife to the park for a beautiful afternoon picnic is not in December when it's cold and it's rainy. You don't want to take him out. It's muggy outside. You guys are wearing jackets. You know, there's no birds. It's overcast. You know, there's rain. That's a forecast for the thing. That's not the time you want to take your wife out for a pleasant day at the park. No, you want to go in March or April, you know, when the sun's out, the flowers are blooming. Everybody's running around. It's beautiful. You can go out. You can take her there. So Longman says, springtime is the universal time for love. Warmer weather, the fragrance of flowers, a time to go outside, a time for the removal of clothes and for intimacy. The combination with the next phrase, the rain is over and gone, we can fix the time of the year as an April-May time frame. Winter in Israel is characterized by strong and cold rains. So it rained a lot in the winter. Almost the only time that they got a lot of rains was in the winter time. Sometimes they had late rains that helped with harvest, but mostly that was in the winter time that Israel had rains. Verse 12, basically it's saying the flowers are everywhere. The time when everything is singing, the birds are the flowers are blooming, the birds are singing, the trees and the vines are sprouting. New life was everywhere and abounding. So again, you hear this man, he knows he's a romantic guy. He knows when to bring her out. He knows when to draw her away. It's when it's springtime. And again, this is all poetic language. This is all talking about how he's really drawing on her heartstrings of the woman. Providence says the glory of springtime provides the backdrop. As life bursts anew from the earth and all the creatures stir and renew their activity, we're invited to picture flowers and fruit trees, mountains and hills, deer and doves, and to marvel at it all. The lovers identify themselves with this wider creation. So, this guy knows how to do it. The NIV of verse 13 says, the fig tree forms its early fruit. The blossoming vines spread their fragrance. Arise, come, my darling, my beautiful, and come with me. Again, is in verse 10, arise and come away are in Hebrew imperative verbs of command. He's insisting on this. This guy really, really, really wants her to come away with him. And boy, that just excites her again. Longman says the warmth and pleasant fragrance of the early spring draw people outside. He also says in verses 11 through 13, lists a number of phenomena associated with spring. Poetically, it thus evokes a scene of newness, vigor, freshness, joy, expectation, and a context for joyous lovemaking. So again, the whole point of these poetic language here is a new, refreshing, live, joyful time together as she comes away with him. Here in verse 14, whether it's the woman still quoting the man or whether it's the man speaking, in either case, it's the man that's speaking. I take it to be that just the man is speaking, but others take it to be that she's still quoting him, verses 11 through 14. But now he speaks to her. He says, "O my dove, in the clefts of the rock, in the secret places of the cleft, let me see your face, let me hear your voice, for your voice is sweet and your face is lovely." One translation says, "My dove, hiding in the caves high on the cliff, hidden here on the mountain, let me see you, let me hear your voice. Your voice is so pleasant and you are so beautiful." Now I want to say that the majority of the commentators, even some of the modern commentators, I disagree with their interpretations of this verse. They say that she's being like a dove that's hiding away from him, that she's finding these places to hide, and she's kind of playing hard to get. I don't think that's the case at all. Of what we read in chapter 1 and chapter 2, she's trying to do everything she can to get close to him. She's trying to do everything she can to be near him. She tries to even find out where he takes a siesta at work so that she can go over and be with him. So I don't think she's trying to pay hard to get at all. So I disagree with that interpretation. In fact, if you read this here, he says, in the clefts of the rock and in the secret places, that's where I want to see your face. That's where I want to hear your voice, because your voice is sweet and your face is lovely. What I see is those are places where a dove does hide, but that's where he wants to go to be with her. Alone, hidden, by themselves where nobody else can see them. That's where he wants to see her face. That's where he wants to hear her voice. So rather than her playing hard to get and hiding, I see it as a place where he wants to be with her, where they're all alone. And so that's just my take on it. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't agree that she's trying to play hard to get here. I want to say for men that it is with me. I think there's something very, very feminine and soft about a woman's voice. In fact, it's very, very attractive to men. Whenever I hear my wife pray, or whenever I talk to her on the phone, she has such a quiet, meek voice. I just love to hear her voice, when she talks on the phone with me. And so it is true that a voice is sweet, and I want to hear her voice. And I think that's something that's very, very attractive to a man. And isn't it interesting that in Proverbs, negatively, what is it that draws men into trouble with the adulterous thing? It's those enticing, seductive words. And I've even told this to people because I've seen it happen several times. I saw it happen in a church that I was in many, many years ago, where a man started talking to a married man started talking to a married woman on the phone. And one of the things they started doing together, they started praying together on the phone. And I thought, man, I told that guy, no way, man, you better call timeout right now because you're going to go down the wrong road. And I don't even remember what happened. I forgot all the details of that. But I said, no. Don't get on the phone too long with a woman, especially not your wife, because you're going to start hearing that voice, and that voice can be very attractive to a man. And so be careful. The voice is sweet. The face is lovely. The whole appearance, actually. The normal word for face here, Hebrew word for face, is not used. It's the word for the appearance, the whole body appearance. I don't know why they use face here, because it is clearly a word that talks about the whole appearance. So he wanted to see her whole body, wanted to see everything of her, top to bottom, not just her face. All right, let's go to page 38. This is also one of the best-known lines in the Song of Songs. And note the plurals. Even though it's easy for us to understand this, we can understand, right? Foxes need to be caught because the little foxes will come in and they'll eat the roots, or they'll spoil the vines when the vines are very tender. And that's easy enough. We can understand that picture. But what does it mean? What exactly is it saying? And another problem that all commentators have is who's speaking. Here it says her brothers. My translation says her brothers. Other translation says it's the daughters of Jerusalem. Other people think it's the Shulamite. Other people think it's the man. And so we don't really know who's speaking here. We can't tell who's speaking. And what does it mean by catch for us, the foxes? And they're damaging our vines. It's plural. Who are these people? So that is caused a lot of trouble for commentators to know exactly what, who the us, the ours, what does it mean? What are foxes? What do they really mean? I know what they are in the natural, but what does this mean for us in a relationship? So these are all questions that people have. But I want to say, just like there was a serpent in the garden, there can be a fox in the vineyard, And obviously that can't be something good here because it can ruin things. Aiken says little things can become big things in a marriage. Trouble is usually in the small things. And that's true. We've seen that, right? Just the small things that grind away and can cause a lot of trouble, irritant. It's like getting a little rock in your shoe, a little piece of sand in your shoe, and it can just drive you crazy, and it's just a little tiny rock. Well, the same way foxes are that way. Proven says this in the context with 2:14, where the man wants to come out, her to come out. Her response is to remind him, however, that the outside world is in fact a dangerous place for herself and for the other women. their reluctance to come outside is justified. So what is this? What are the wording here? What is this actually? Who's actually talking here? And to whom is this command being addressed? Because this is a Hebrew imperative verb. Catch these foxes. Don't let them spoil the vine. The United Bible Society translator says, catches the foxes, the little foxes. The words themselves seem clear, but our first problem is to know who us is referring to. A second problem is to understand what lies behind the word foxes, right? So these are imperative verbs. I like what Wiersbe says. The little foxes represent those things that quietly destroy relationships. How many of you, what would you think are little foxes? What are things that destroy relationships between a man and a woman? What are some things? Nagging, okay. Yeah, nagging. Yeah, that's not good. What else? Lying. Oh, boy, that's a big one. Yeah, that'll destroy. You cannot build a relationship on lies. No way. Yeah, it has to be in truth. What's that? Fleeting eyes? Oh, okay. Yes. Oh, yeah, that's for sure. Roaming eyes. Yeah. Well, we can come up. So I'll leave that to you, and that's part of your homework. What are three little foxes that ruin the vine? All of which you guys mentioned are correct. I think some of the commentators talked about sexual morality, which of course is huge. Verse 16. This is the verse of all verses for the woman. This expresses her desire the most. Of all the desires that she has towards her man, this is the one that she has. And she's going to repeat it in different ways 3 different times in the song. So here it says, my beloved is mine, and I am his. She needs to know he is mine, I'm his. We're all in. He's mine, I'm all his. The chapter 6, verse 3, says, this is the NIV's version, I am my lover's, and my lover is mine. He browses among the lilies. And chapter 7, verse 10, which was the verse I used the first time I taught the Song of Songs, was the verse I used to express ultimately the woman's desire. I belong to my lover. And notice what she says, his desire is for me. She was noticing that he had all of his desire was for her. She was the center of attention. So this is one of the deepest longings in a woman, to be uniquely possessed by her man. Thus, any type of betrayal or any loss of uniqueness is utterly devastating for her, right? So if she was the Mona Lisa, and that's the way the relationship started, I'm the only one, I am the Rose of Sharon, I'm the lily of the valley, and 10 years later, she is a Walmart picture special. That is totally devastating for her. That she's just like every other girl, you know. I'm just like everybody else. Man, that kills her. That kills a woman's uniqueness. Is totally devastating for her. So she has to maintain the Mona Lisa by the way the husband acts to her. My beloved is mine, and I am his expresses the close relationship of the lovers, the sense that they belong exclusively to one another. That's the key word, exclusively. Everybody else is out. Everybody's out of this relationship except me and him. And I think one of the most tragic ones was, remember when Prince Charles and Diana, when they were together the first time when they got together, it was such a beautiful love story, but Camilla got in there. And you saw those BBC interviews with Diana, Lady Diana. And here was she was a very beautiful woman. And to look at her in those interviews, her eyes were so sad. She was just in tears. Her eyes were sloped down. I mean, it was really tragic. And she said it was really crowded because there was 3 people in the relationship. And she says that's what devastated her the most. In Hebrew, this line is very poetic, and it only uses 4 Hebrew words. My lover is one word, to me is one word, and I is another word, to him is another word. It's very short, very to the point. My lover, to me, and I to him. That's it. There's nothing else. There's nothing else that we need. It's just him and me, period. You are no Tom or Harry. You are uniquely mine. You're my lover, and you're no one else's. And I'm not sure what this phrase means. He feeds his flock among the lilies. Because obviously sheep don't eat lilies. They don't just go out eating lilies. But it's a phrase that means to shepherd among the lilies. And I'm not sure what that means. When we get into chapter 4 and following, a lot of this begins to have sexual overtones. But here, I'm not sure exactly what it means. Wiersbe says feeds means to pasture a flock. Maybe Longman is right. It's simply trying to evoke a pastoral scene and feeling. And we're going to find the very similar language when you get over to chapter 4, verses 5 and 6. The end of chapter 4, verse 5 talks about feeding among the lilies, and it's a sexual connotation. And verse 6 of chapter 4 begins a lot of the language that you're going to see in verse 17. So we'll talk about that when we get to those verses. Finally, closes out with a verse that's very difficult to figure out what it's saying here. Until the day breaks and the shadows flee away, turn, my beloved. This is her speaking to him. Turn, my beloved, and be like a gazelle or a young stag upon the mountains of Bether. So people have fought over, number one, what time of the day is it? Is it nighttime or is it the morning time? And others, is he wanting to turn away, take off running, or turn towards me and take off running? And so it seems to me that it's in the morning, the dawn, when the dawn breaks, the shadows flee away, and still asking him to turn towards her. Because again, I can't picture her wanting him to turn away from her. But some people believe that just come back at another time, don't come right now. So anyway, this is kind of a little bit of a mysterious verse. The word Bether there, some people take it to, like this translation here, take it to mean the actual name of some mountains called Bether. Bether means separation. If you have the New King James, it has it along the bottom. Literally, it means separation, the mountains of separation. But not exactly sure what that verse is saying, but it's included here. So maybe when we get a little further on, we start talking about the gazelles and the mountains, it'll have a little bit clearer meaning. All right. So, bottom line is, the woman was speaking here. A couple of times the man was speaking, but the woman was speaking and she was hearing what her man was saying. And again, it was all about love and being together with her lover. All right. Okay, any questions?